A new documentary on the church has been asking whether Christianity should be held up high for its best actions or held accountable for its worst. The Crusades created one particularly dark episode. Here's a clip from the film called For the Love of God.
In the blistering heat of July 15th, 1099, 10,000 European crusaders broke through Jerusalem's walls and fought their way up here to one of Islam's most sacred sites and committed one of the great atrocities of Christian history. Thousands barricaded themselves in up here and sought refuge in the mosque. Some even climbed the roof of the mosque to escape. But the Crusaders burst through and slaughtered men, women, and children. Some they threw off the high walls to their deaths. The rest they butchered. The carnage apparently filled this great promenade. When the fighting was done, the pilgrims, as they like to call themselves, marched 500 metres that way to the ancient Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where they held a Thanksgiving service.
John Dickson, who is one of the presenters of the documentary made by the Centre for Public Christianity, and he is back with us on the panel. Welcome back.
Well, thank you. That's depressing morning TV.
Very sobering.
Fascinating though, and I just love this show. But anyway, go on.
You're a man of God, but you're presenting this kind of unvarnished version of Christianity. Why is it so important to do that?
Well, Jesus said, take the log out of your own eye, and then you can see clearly.
Yep.
And so there's a sense in which we're doing that for 90 minutes. And that scene in particular was very difficult because I had to deliver this line about the Christian Crusaders slaughtering men, women and children in Jerusalem with my Muslim guide, Ezra, standing just off camera. And by the time I got my lines right, it took me about 3 times, she had a tear in her eye. And I thought, this is still an open wound.
And it was 1,000 years ago.
And it's 1,000 years ago.
But
it's still so potent.
It's still talked about and argued about in discussions over what should happen with the Middle East today. That's how potent it is. Is it time that we started saying, just as we always stress every time there's a terrorist attack that these people are not true Muslims, do we have to say these people were not true Christians? They were not Christian crusaders. They were medieval butchers who were slaughtering under a flag that
I want to say that.
misrepresented.
I want to say that. The problem is when you read the primary documents of those crusaders, them writing back home, they loved God and Christ, and they held a church service the next day to say, thank you, Jesus, that we slaughtered them all. So, yeah, I want to say they
love Allah, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And the thing that's particularly bad for Christian crusaders is that they're meant to be following the guy who said, love your enemies and do good to those who hate you, and ended up dying on a cross to embody that, and there they are killing in his name. It's so incongruous.
But obviously your documentary is about encouraging Christianity, isn't it? Like,
I think we're doing a pretty poor job.
but because, no, I'm wondering, how do you look after the needs of Christian people having a documentary that talks about stuff like this?
I think it's good for Christians to face the worst in their history and to imagine what might be bad in the present. That's the beauty of studying history. It makes you think, oh, my goodness, what can't I see about myself today? But the documentary also deals with the beautiful things Christianity has given the world. We don't shy away from that. Obviously, the hospitals, charities for all, these came from the church, and that's the church at its best. That's the church singing the tune Jesus gave them. The problem is they sing out of tune a bit at a time, and we remember those, and so we should.
Well, the truth is, sorry to interrupt, Ange, but the truth is no religion is without dark parts, even as we've seen in Myanmar, Buddhists are slaughtering Muslims at the moment and pushing them out of their country. Sorry, Ange.
So we saw you there in Jerusalem, which is such a hotbed of strife on all levels, sectarian, political. By looking at the past, can you see a way forward?
It seems to me that when Christians have been given the keys to earthly power, they are at their worst. But when they're happily sitting on the edges, serving society, trying to persuade society, but without any sense of entitlement, they're at their best.
So absolute power corrupts absolutely?
It does. And when you've got a religious injection behind that power, it seems to be particularly awful because you call on God to justify what you're doing, and the masses follow. That's certainly true of the Crusades, but we deal with, you know, witch trials, inquisitions, slavery, and all those other things as well.
Are there any happy parts to the story?
Yeah, I feel like this is so depressing for morning TV. Yes, the origins of human rights come from Christianity. And we get top secular scholars from around the universities of the world saying, look, there's no doubt Jesus gave the world its view that everyone is equal. The slave is equal to the master. And yet they'll say Christians didn't quite live up to that. They gave us this idea, this beautiful tune, and then sometimes they've sung it beautifully and we lay that out, and sometimes they've gone right off key, and that is awful.
And it is worth remembering, as you said, Jesus was the first person to present this idea of equality in a Roman Empire that was completely hierarchical, in which women had no rights whatsoever, that were used as political property. The Catholic Church was instrumental in saying that women should only marry someone if they actually want to marry them, that they couldn't be forced into marriage. The Church provided the first schools in medieval Europe when Rome collapsed, and there was absolutely no order whatsoever. I know all these things. And I think the Church actually started the first hospital right here in Sydney. It wasn't the government doing these things, it was
the first hospital in all of history was founded by Fabiola, the richest woman in Rome, who became a Christian after a terrible domestic violence situation, and then gave all of her money to the poor of Rome and founded the first public hospital, and we live in the wake of that.
But I'll also argue against myself, and you've written a book called The Doubter's Guide to Jesus, which is something we all struggle with. Why is it then that in this time, every single major power in Western Europe was Christian? They all had the same religion in common, yet even then, they were still, if they weren't too busy killing the Muslims in the Middle East, they were killing each other. Why can't this religion of peace actually even be peaceful unto itself?
It can in many forms. I mean, there are many times in history where Christianity stopped wars, but it hasn't stopped all wars. And yes, Catholics fought Protestants, Protestants fought Catholics, Catholics and Protestants ganged up against Protestants. You know, and so it's messed up, which I think tells you the problem isn't religion or irreligion. The problem is the human heart. You didn't need religion to start the wars of Greece and Rome. They were doing fine with warfare before Christians came along.
That's right.
So war and bloodshed is universal. What isn't universal are those other things you said the Church brought into the world. Human rights, humility, charity, hospitals. Those things were the special gifts of Christianity. The problem is they didn't always live up to those great ideals.
You can find out more about this incredible documentary by going to publicchristianity.org. Dr. John Dickson, thanks so much for stopping by again. Great talking to you.
Thank you.